I think when we can actually see that it's not about us, and oftentimes it could be about some type of inner turmoil that's being expressed in a very unhealthy way of like walking away from conflict rather than leaning into it, we can begin to just kind of wipe off like the energetic cords where we're blaming ourselves and thinking that we did something to cause this. We can stop introjecting the other person's actions meaning something about our value when we realize that they might be just as freaking confused before they ghost as we are after they do.
So a few different things. A lot of times when people are in a relationship and they aren't the one who breaks up with the person and they're the one being broken up with, a lot of times we get super, almost extra attached to it. And I love this, idea of, we kind of hold on to this thing that we know was not right for us. Like we know that it was not right for us. We know that it really probably wasn't serving us in the best way and adding value to our life, but we almost extra attached to it normally when that happens. Now, do you have any advice on that or anything to say on that to help those who are going through that? And I would also love to know why you think people do get so attached to things that they know just are not meant for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. So common, something I've personally firsthand experienced myself through the years of being in relationship and out of relationship. And I'll start with the why this occurs. And I want to come at it from a level of just, I think it's so important to understand the why this is happening, because if we don't understand why it's happening, not only are we met with the grief that comes with the relationship ending, but then we're also having to carry around the weight of the confusion as to why we're hanging on to something that a part of us knows is not good for us. Right. And so now we're like confused and we're grieving, and then we're at conflict and at war with ourselves, where we're like, one part maybe wants the person back or wants some type of connection. The other part wants to walk away. And it just adds like insult to injury, and it's not a good situation to be in. So if we can get a little bit of a read on what might actually be happening inside of us that has us still holding on, I think that it starts to provide the clues as to how we can let go. And so a couple of things here that I wanted to just put out there. And so the first one is that typically when we are in a relationship with somebody that we are in love with, that we feel like we can be ourselves with to some degree, there is an aspect of ourselves that we get to experience in the relationship where maybe with that person for the first time, there's some part of our identity that we discover that gets to be expressed in the container of that relationship. And when the relationship ends, it almost feels as also that the permission to express that part of ourselves is no longer possible. And so oftentimes what we're grieving is not necessarily just the person, but we're grieving the opportunity that person gave us to be the kind of person we wanted to be. And so a younger part of us is thinking that we need to maybe get that person back so we can give ourselves permission to express ourselves that way, to love that way, to feel free that way, to feel charming that way, whatever quality it is, whatever way that you were that expressed itself in that relationship. We think we need the middleman again in order for that. And part of detaching from that is actually starting to examine, like, who is it that I gave myself permission to be when I was with this person? What are the ways that I felt? What are the beliefs that I had about life? What was my outlook and perspective? And how do I actually take the access that I got to that person while in the relationship, and how do I give myself permission to be that right now in the moment? And that's one very tangible way that we can begin to take our power back from the situation. Because, and that goes into like this other point, is that when we're the ones that are broken up with, it very much feels like choice has been taken away from us, and that we're left in a disempowered place where now in some ways we're at effect of the circumstance and we're a bit into victim consciousness. And we're just kind of stuck. And it's like, God, I didn't choose this. And, what can I do about it? And maybe I need the other person to somehow give me, permission to let go, or I need to have a final conversation with them, or something needs to shift. And so, another piece here that I want to put in here that I think is really important is another question that I encourage my clients to ask is, like, if you felt like you got left in limbo with a breakup where maybe it didn't feel complete on your end, right? The breakup ended prematurely. You didn't agree with it. You thought maybe that you guys could have worked it out. Now you're kind of in this limbo place. Uh, the invitation I would put out there is that no one can actually leave you in limbo. No one can leave you in a place where you're in this kind of between worlds. That is actually a self-created state. And when we can just see that, and we can even ask the question, how am I creating this state of limbo that I might be in? It actually allows us to start to move from victim consciousness into creator consciousness. And for us to see the things that we're believing, the thoughts that we're having, the movies that we're playing in our mind, the assumptions that we're making that are actually keeping us in this place of quote unquote limbo where we can't move on and let go. So those are just two things. And I've got
it's almost like that saying where like nobody can make you feel inferior without your consent. It definitely does come back to you no matter what. Like that person didn't make you feel that way. You made yourself feel that way. They might have done things and stuff like that, but if you have a strong, if you're strong with yourself and strong with your self-belief and strong and confident and knowing that you're a good person, you're good this, and that you are enough even with or without that person, then you're gonna not gonna feel that victim mentality as much. Obviously easier said than done, because I know no matter what, every single time that something does not work out for me, I'm always like, it's me. I wasn't enough. Why wasn't I enough for them? I don't understand. Why couldn't I make them happy? But it wasn't you at the end of the day. And also that's them on their end, right? That's stuff that they may be going through that you don't even know about, that they may be holding from you and not being able to express to themselves or to others. So I think that's also like really, really important, because I feel like I normally have a hard time super letting go, even if I know it's not about me, because I'm always just wondering what is going on. I feel like I don't have the full answer. And sometimes when I feel like I don't have the full answer, I just want to know it so bad, but sometimes you're not going to know the full answer, and they may not know the full answer either.
Totally. And that confusion can definitely burn a hole in our presence and our ability to create well-being, for sure. And something you mentioned there that I want to just like double click on and add a little bit to is this other piece here, is that when someone breaks up with us, what often happens is they almost like release the kraken of the inner critic on the inside of us, where all of these different, maybe whispering accusations about our self-worth, suddenly the volume gets turned up and we're left alone confronting those self-incriminating accusations. And what oftentimes people do is they may want to get back into the relationship, or they want to get some type of reprieve from that by talking to the person to find out that it was them and not themselves, so that they can exonerate themselves from these self-incriminating accusations. And I think it's an opportunity. I think the beauty of breakups is that when we do kind of notice ourselves going to a place of self-blame, it's an empowering act to write out the different things that we're saying to ourselves that are so painful, and then to be able to go through like an examination process about whether or not those things are actually true. Because if we don't do that, what often can happen then is like, we kind of get through it, and then we feel a little bit wounded. Maybe our heart's a little bit more closed down. And then it's like we're looking for another relationship possibly to save us from ourselves unconsciously. And so breakups are such an amazing opportunity to really do the work and clear the gunk out, clear those really limiting, incriminating beliefs that maybe we picked up as little kids because of some shit that happened when we were younger.
Absolutely. I love that you just said that, really created that into some opportunity. Because I know a lot of times when things aren't going right in relationships and in life, you're just kind of like, oh, why me? And it's like, whatever. But if you can stop and realize that no matter what, no matter if whatever bad things are happening to you, you can use that as an opportunity to grow and to become better. And I know every single time I always become a little bit stronger and a little bit better after each breakup. And I've actually noticed for myself personally that I'm going to actually be able to get over it a little bit faster each time. I mean, I still have those feelings. I still have the same feelings that I did before, but now after each time and after reevaluating and kind of having a little toolkit of like, okay, cool. This is what I've learned from this, I'm able to get past it a little bit more than I was before. I remember my first breakup ever. Oh my
Oh man.
goodness. I think I was like, I was down for the count. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I was a
Mhm.
mess. I couldn't do anything. If I was with somebody, I was not looking at them. I was literally somewhere else, just wondering and thinking about the situation and why, replaying all the good moments in my head and replaying the bad moments in my head. And now I feel fortunate enough that now when it does happen, I just kind of realize, okay, cool. Like you said, I kind of learned from it a little bit more. And I've also been coming more and more to know that the right people in your life stay. I have
Mhm.
amazing friends in my life. I'm sure you have amazing friends as well. I was like, if I have these amazing friend relationships in my life and they've stuck around and they love who I am, like I'm gonna find somebody who will be exactly the same thing.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I'm hearing in many ways like you in developing industrial strength, resilience around the breakup and being able to bounce back and use it as an opportunity to come back to yourself and realize the abundance and the love that you have in your life, and that maybe the breakup is actually for the best, and it's because there's some type of incompatibility, even if you can't see it in the moment, right? Like if they're breaking up with you, there's obviously some incompatibility happening, and we don't always need to be witness to that in order for it to be real. It's just happening. And so when we can let go and come back to ourselves, yeah, we get better and quicker at it each time. And when we know too, this is the beauty I think of having more and more breakups under your belt. Not that I recommend that as necessarily a path one should go out and seek, but you also begin to develop a fearlessness around opening your heart, because your nervous system really knows that you can survive it, which then allows you to be more of yourself in relationship and take more risk and be more vulnerable and put your head and your ego on the chopping block, because you know you'll survive on the other side regardless of what happens. And I think that is ultimately what leads us into a path of truly being able to find someone that can see us and love us for who we are and is playing the same game.
I love what you just said that you can survive it. I never actually fully thought of it like that. And I feel
Yeah.
like that's just like the perfect way to have put it. The past situation that I was in personally, I was really excited about, like so excited about it. And I was also really proud of myself because from the beginning, I started setting the boundaries that I wanted, that I learned from my past things. Like, I'm like, nope, just so you know, like, I know we're
Mm.
going out, but this is what I want. I'm not looking for anything else. If that's not what you want, no big deal, totally fine. But like, this is what I'm looking for. And I was really excited because I finally like had set that boundary at the beginning and everything was going super well until per usual, it wasn't. And you're like, wait, this is kind of weird. The person wasn't actually showing up to the things. They weren't showing up for me just to, even when I did amazing things, you always want someone to kind of be like, oh man, great work. I could tell they were kind of somewhere else. So I decided to communicate and ask. I said, hey, I see there's something going on here. What's happening? So him and I had a conversation, and this is where it's going to actually lead into what I've been hearing from a lot of people lately, is that he was actually stuck in his head from a past situation that he had been ghosted, and that triggered him in some way. And I could have been really mad about this situation because I'm like, oh, you're thinking about the past girl, and we've been hanging out for like a month or two. But I also like almost felt this, and it's something around one of those lines has happened to me before. And I remember being super triggered, and it did last a few months for me personally. So I honestly kind of like felt a little bit of compassion, which is kind of weird because people are like, wait, you felt compassionate about it or whatever. So I would love to chat a little bit about that, about situations like that, being ghosted and stuff like that, that can really trigger you. And maybe you don't fully realize that it's triggered you, in the moment, and maybe it triggers you like later on. You're like, oh wow, I was actually really bothered by that, and that brought me back to my past of my childhood and blah 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 blah. So I would love to chat about that because lately it's actually been. I mean, I haven't really ever gotten like fully ghosted or whatever, but why do people do that? Why does that trigger people so badly? I mean, in this world right now, I'm finding that so many people are actually telling me that that's happening to them, and I'm literally shocked.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, so first and foremost, I'll just say that, yeah, being ghosted is incredibly painful. And a, it is something that delivers someone into a place of confusion. And confusion is a very painful place to be. Um, Confusion is more painful than even being in a situation where you're miserable and you know it, like you're certain about it. Maybe like there's verbal abuse in the relationship, and it's like, you should get out, but you at least know what's coming. And again, you know how to survive it. Like there's a way in which when we're confused, it throws everything up in the air. And so being in a state of confusion is incredibly painful. We can deal with certainty, even if we're miserable, more than we can deal with confusion as human beings. And I think ghosting really does just rip the rug out from people, right? And I also want to say that ghosting can also be painful for the person who is ghosting as well. And we often don't really think about that. But I know people, and I've definitely been in those situations where I had a choice. And I know that the certain, I think what can happen on either side, both men and women, because ghosting happens on both sides. People, you engage in a connection, and then there's a certain level of intimacy, and then somebody disappears. And I think it can be incredibly awkward. I think it can bring about humiliation for the person, where they feel very incongruent about suddenly there's a change and they don't even know why there's a change, and they might not even know how to articulate the change. And then they even think about the relationship and they wonder if there's enough emotional investment to even be that vulnerable to articulate the humiliation of not knowing what they want and the lack of congruity on their part. They're already feeling really confused, maybe down on themselves, and they're not wanting to face even more rejection from the other person or judgment from the other person. Because, you know, you even said it yourself. It's like, hey, like, we've been dating 2 months, right? Like, get your shit together. And yeah. So it's kind of like now they're walking right into the fire, and they're probably already feeling a bit they could very well be feeling disappointed about having taken it already this far. Now, I'm not trying to excuse ghosting. I want to just make that very clear, that I'm not like saying that ghosting is a valid way of breaking up with somebody, but I'm wanting to open the territory up so that, because I think when we can actually see that it's not about us, and oftentimes it could be about some type of inner turmoil that's being expressed in a very unhealthy way of like walking away from conflict rather than leaning into it, we can begin to just kind of wipe off like the energetic cords where we're blaming ourselves and thinking that we did something to cause this. We can stop introjecting the other person's actions meaning something about our value when we realize that they might be just as freaking confused before they ghost as we are after they do. Right?
I love what you just said, that it's not about you. Because I mean, I think that's there's definitely something within them. There's something that they are going through that you may know. And I remember, you know, I told this guy, which is crazy. I was trying to give him advice and help him through it. And I was literally just like, you have to forgive the person and forgive yourself. You have to just forgive it and forgive it. And you have to let it go. I know it's easier said than done, but you know, this person clearly wasn't the right person, right? This wasn't the person who's, you know, going to add the value that you wanted to into your life. And you just need to forgive it. Like, you can't sit there and continue to try and figure out what happened or why it happened or whatever. Again, there's clearly something outside of this that has nothing to do with you. Yeah.
And people don't know how to communicate. Like that's another thing. These are situations that we're not taught how to deal with in school, or, you know, our parents maybe teach us it, but they might also be handing down their own dysfunctional communication as well. You know, we might learn that how to deal with conflict is to just walk away from it rather than actually step into it. And so it takes a certain level of development to not ghost when suddenly we're fraught with all, you know, our body says one thing, but our mind says something else. I mean, I think that's something that very much happens in the realm of relationship. And I know it happens for guys, and I can see it. And I do see it happen for women as well, but it's where you think that you're ready for a relationship and you want connection. Most parts of you are aligned that you're wanting connection, you're wanting to get to know somebody, and you feel like, yeah, I'm going to arrive at being ready at some point with this person. Let me keep moving forward. And then all of a sudden things start to get close, and you realize that maybe you're not fully over your last relationship. Because what's happening is it's almost like a yoga pose where let's just imagine that you're in like warrior 2, a very light warrior 2, right? Where you're kind of like, you know, arms out, you're like leaning into the stretch. Maybe you pulled your groin earlier, right? Like, you know, a couple of weeks ago, and you think you're healed because you're not feeling it as you walk. But as you start to lean into that pose more and more, you actually feel the injury reactivate. And you realize that you're actually not ready for the full expression of the pose. You didn't know it until you actually got into the pose, right? I think this happens with relationship as well. We think we're ready. We start to get deeper into intimacy, and suddenly we realize there's this wound still there, this place where we haven't let go yet. And it sucks and it's embarrassing. And it's like, wow, how do I not know myself so much that like I couldn't detect that this is where I was? Right. And then all of a sudden having a conversation about that just seems like, this is something I need to have with my therapist. Right. But again, it doesn't excuse it. It just to provide some context of some of the things that people might be grappling with, because at the end of the day, being able to have the courage to step in and have a conversation and end things, even if it is painful and hurts, it's just such a way of releasing the energy and restoring some level of respect and trust of the connection, even if it's not going to continue.
Absolutely. And I think that that's exactly what happened. I think that with this person, he was also just as excited about it as me. We were both so excited about it. Then like, as we were getting, like, he's like, wow, this is actually really good. Like, we're both communicating really well. Things are going well. We're doing amazing things together. And then, like you said, I think he realized, oh shit, I still like, I'm not ready right now. I still have got stuff I need to take care of. And I respected the fact, even though I had to ask, that he decided to be very open about it. And as much as it hurt on both of our ends, we were like, yeah, on both ends agreed. Like, you definitely need to work on yourself and really come back to that self-love and self-care and knowing that you are enough. Because I always try and remind everybody, I'm sure you tell your clients this too, no one's going to complete you. No one's going to be the one who actually makes you feel better and fixes you and fixes all your things. You have to do that yourself. And the person that you're with is going to be there along for the ride and the journey and help, support you along that way. But they're not supposed to be there to fix you. Like, I wasn't supposed to be there to fix him and what he had to do. He needed to go through that on his own, because I feel like that's so important. At the end of the day, you go home and you're by yourself a lot of the times, right? How do you talk to yourself? How do you feel about yourself when you're sitting there alone?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I feel like that is super important. I feel like I'm very fortunate because, again, as I've said at the end about that situation, I was also fortunate again to see how much I've grown through the past things, how I am feeling actually. Like, I'm like, wow, I do feel okay by myself. And I hadn't felt like that in years. So I was a lot more compassionate to what had happened and caring, because I've been at the places where I've been broken up with and things like that. And I didn't feel good at all. But this was just, experience and time and a lot of mental things that I do. There's so much that I do every single day. I mean, I wake up every single day, I always journal. It's always my non-negotiables. I take a moment with myself to journal, to write how I'm feeling, to write my gratitude, to write the good and the bad things. And those little things that I do every single day, I feel like really set me up to start to feel good about myself. And I feel like a lot of people sometimes also forget about that stuff. They don't do the small little things every single day that are going to add up.
Totally. I mean, it's like working out, right? It's just putting in the work, putting in the reps and the attention around the things that are really going to feed your soul and have you connect with you. And a daily practice is amazing. Yeah.
Yes.
There's a book called The Slight Edge, which talks about this, and they just talk about how it's almost like investing yourself daily in those kind of like habits and rituals and practices is creating compound interest, where at some point it almost just like takes off exponentially, but you might not see the results for a while, and you have to keep investing and keep putting in until suddenly it hits this breaking point, this tipping point, and there's like a massive identity reorganization that can happen.
Absolutely. I even feel like from my daily routines that I even feel calmer about things, which is weird. Like sometimes, before I was doing all this, I would get really mad and like tense, like super early on with things, and now I'm like, oh, like I feel okay because I had that second to myself this morning that I took that. But you said it does take time. You have to do these things very consistently. You have to be aware of how you are speaking to yourself as well. I changed that a lot as well. I used to, I feel like I used to speak to myself very poorly. Like, oh, Ange, what's wrong with you? Oh, why'd you do that? Oh, like all those things. Totally. And even shifting those things and those thoughts and being like, oh, no. I'm not talking to myself like that. No way.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, it's something that I wanted to just kind of double click on with the ghosting piece, just circle back on that. Do you mind if we talk about that?
No, of course. Let's go. Yeah. I feel like this is a really, really big topic right now.
Yeah, it is. And so I think there's a couple different stances that we can take in it. One is to look at it and say, this is just kind of a cultural phenomenon that's happening right now. And it's a result of maybe a lack of people skills. It's a result of all of the different options through dating. It's a result of just the consciousness of how the dating landscape has evolved. And we can put in some ways like this as a phenomena that exists outside of us, and then we can be at effect of it and kind of hope that it doesn't happen to us, right? There's another way of looking at it, which I think is far more challenging. And it's a question that it just, as a coach, it's one that I encourage my clients that I work with to explore, especially if they are noticing that they're the common denominator of several ghosts that are occurring in their life. And it's the question of how are you creating yourself as a ghost maker?
So looking at yourself and not the person, and not the person ghosting you. So what are you? So what are some things that you think would create someone to have these ghost makers that continue to show up in their lives?
Yeah, great. So I think one of them would be actually moving too fast, right? And this is not always the case, right? So anybody that's listening right now, because this part of the conversation can be really challenging, right? Because it might be like, well, okay, am I the one to blame here? I shouldn't be the one to blame. They did this. So if anybody's listening to that, this is more of an invitation of self-inquiry around being able to dismantle this, having the power to dismantle this dynamic, and maybe being more at cause than you're giving yourself credit for, maybe actually being more powerful in this dynamic that's unfolding than you've been giving yourself credit for. So back to what you're saying, there's a way in which I've seen where people may move too fast in a connection, where they may ignore red flags, where they may not actually be listening to what the other person is actually saying around their ability to connect, and they're following other impulses, maybe getting sexual too quickly, maybe diving in emotionally too quickly, revealing too much too quickly, and not allowing things to be like a slow boil where there's a foundation of trust and respect being built. A lot of ghosting that I see happens more in the realm where if we were to look at like trust, respect, and then like romanticism, there's a lot of the ghosting happens when there's this really a kind of let's say an expansion too quickly in the realm of romance, where almost both people are being swept away in the fantasy. And then suddenly somewhere, as it's moving that quickly, there's not a foundation of trust and respect that's following underneath it to support it. And then one person or both people kind of wake up to the fact that they might actually be in relationship with a fantasy rather than the reality of the other person. And then it becomes very easy to ghost a fantasy because you're not actually ghosting the real person. So this is where we get access to power, when we can begin to look at, okay, how am I contributing to, how am I consenting and allowing ghost makers, like how am I creating myself as a ghost maker, and actually turning men possibly into apparitions, or turning women into apparitions that just like disappear and float through the wall without a word. So those are just a couple ways that we can begin to ask and look at to restore the power and hopefully begin to break this dynamic.
Yeah, like breaking the cycle. I mean, I love that you just said that, moving too quickly and not creating that strong foundation. I feel like that is so important. I said so many times with people actually were calling it, my two guy friends I was talking to about this say this too. It's so funny. I don't know if you're a sign person, but they're both Aries. They were Aries. Yeah. And I feel like I keep seeing this with them as well, but they say that they see a girl and they'll look maybe like on Hinge, or maybe they'll meet them in real life, and they like already like sometimes will plan their entire life out and they're in love with that person right away. And it is that quickness of like, again, you don't even know that person, because you don't even know if those things that you have in your head that you made up, like you said, are even true. Yeah. But I definitely have seen this same exact circumstance happen with those guys, the same Aries guys, the same exact thing. And it's like kind of that pattern of the girl will disappear, but they go in so quickly and so strong. So I think that's something that so many people need to look, especially depending on what you're looking for, right? Like I know for me, I'm really looking for my person. Like I'm looking for my person. So when I go in, I really do want to have that strong foundation. I want to know, what your boundaries are. I want to know more about you each time that I see you. I don't want to be sleeping over your house right away. Like all those things. Like I want to really get to know somebody at this day and age. And I do feel like people, like you said, they just rush right into absolutely everything. So I think this is I think this point is like, even hearing you say it, I'm like, oh my goodness, you're so right.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing that comes up too, as we're talking about it, is like, how are you creating a territory within the two of you where perhaps hard conversations don't feel like they can live, right? So, and this can happen around the fantasy as well, where the dating is like all positive and it's like all positive vibes, and there's not any like room for real talk. It's almost like the two representatives are getting to know each other, and might not really be talking about real things. And there's almost like a aversion to anything that's real or heavy, or that might be perceived as negative. And if that's the case, what we end up doing is we end up insulating the relationship, where it doesn't even feel like there might be an access point in to talk about something that's disappointing, because the relationship's not being built on truth. It's being built on kind of harmony and fun and enthusiasm. So to discreate that, I think it's really important to look at what are the types of conversations you're having with people as you're getting to know them. What are the questions that you're asking? What are the ways in which you're being possibly inauthentic in the relationship? It's a lot easier to ghost someone when there's a level of like, and for people to get ghosted when there's a level of inauthenticity to the relationship versus it being super authentic. So yeah, just another place to look at so that we can take power back and continue to transcend this dynamic.
I have one more question now. I mean, I know we're going, I mean, I'm loving hearing all of that. All this stuff is super, super important for me, for my friends around me, everything that I'm seeing going on. When you first do meet somebody and you go on a date, do you have any questions that you think are really important to ask? It could be like on the first or second date that you feel like are a great way to see if this person is on the same. I know, everybody kind of, I feel like for me personally, I've always had guys who act very different the first couple, first times you're dating, because they're trying to impress me, or they're trying to like, be a little bit something that maybe they're not, like you said. But what kind of questions do you think are important to ask? Are there some key ones that you feel like are important?
Yeah, I mean, the one that pops to mind immediately, and I've talked about this one before, is just very directly, and not from a place of like interrogation, but just what is it that you want from your dating?
Love that.
All right, not necessarily what do you want in this interaction, right? What do you want from me? Which puts almost too much pressure on it, but it's like, look, you're obviously out dating, I'm obviously out dating. What is it that you're wanting from dating? And then to listen very carefully, to really listen very carefully, and also watch body language as well, because they will reveal where they are at. They will reveal where they're at. And it's just so important to look at them through a sober lens. And if there's any doubt, if there's a way in which they're skirting the question, if there's a way in which you're feeling something in your body that's saying put the brakes on, then slow down. Another question too that I would that I think is important too is also just to ask someone where they see themselves in a year or two's time.
Love that.
And that's nothing, we're not even mentioning anything about relationship in that question, but just notice what they say in this vision of themselves. Are they just talking about business? Are they just talking about the travel they're going to be doing? Are they talking about a possible marriage, family, kids? Like, just listening to what are they sorting for and what are they putting out there in the future? That'll tell you a lot as well.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like for another one for me, I don't know if you think this is too soon. I always want to ask now, because the past two things have been interesting situations like this. What was the last thing that you were out of? Like, and how soon was that? Because I feel like once I didn't know when I was first seeing this person, he did not tell me about this other girl. I didn't know there was another girl before me. And if I would have known that it was so soon that this had just happened, I probably would have been like, all right, we definitely need to make sure things are very slow. Because you clearly, I think no matter what, when you get out of something, I don't think you should jump into something like a couple weeks later.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was single, I just a question in line with that too. A woman asked me before we ended up getting intimate. She just said, she's like, "When's the last time you had sex?" And it was so nonchalant. I didn't feel like threatened by it, but it was just so matter of fact. And for me, there was a gap, so I had no problem answering that question. But I had realized in hindsight that if there was somebody that I had just seen the week before, that would have been such an informative question for her. That would have been such an informative answer for her to kind of know where she is and whether or not there's other energy in the field that she needs to be aware of. And it's a completely reasonable question to ask somebody if you're planning on having sex with them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And like, who are you seeing? Are you seeing other people? I think all that stuff is so important. It's an awkward thing to say, but like I said, I even had said to this person, I was like, if you're around doing other things, that's totally fine. I'm not judging you for it, but that's not what I want. Like, I don't want that.
Yep.
I don't want to be like the third person in line or like the, 3 or 4 people that you're seeing. I'm very much the kind of person who wants to really get to know somebody. And I think that's important again, because maybe I'd be different. Maybe I was the person who was like, oh yeah, it's totally fine. Me too. Like, I'm actually like dating on dates all the time and stuff like that. And then it's like, oh, cool. Like, then you can figure out if you're aligned or not.
Yes.
But I think,
and that's key. That's key, Angela, right? Is like just realizing that these questions aren't intrusive. You are standing for yourself and sorting for compatibility. That's it.
Yes.
And that's the name of the game in dating, right? Is we're trying to find out who we're aligned with. And if we're not asking the questions, we're not going to know.
We're not going to know. And again, it's totally fine if even you're listening to this now and you're like, oh, I don't want to be in a relationship. I do just want to like, be seeing a bunch of people. That's fine. I mean, that's literally fine. But I think having these conversations, no matter what, on both sides is so important, so that one person doesn't hurt someone on accident, or the other person. There's so many things that I feel like are super important. And communication is a huge one. Asking those questions, asking the hard questions. I feel like this was so informative, so good. And is there anything that you want to leave the listeners to right now to help them on their journey, or maybe even becoming more in love with themselves so that they can use their experience to get through these hard situations? Because it's going to happen no matter what. Hard situations happen whether you're in a relationship or not. So how can you cope with them and can come out even stronger?
Yeah, I think that the invitation to sit in the perspective that life would not be giving you any experience that it knew that you cannot handle. And that that a breakup and whatever it is that you're going through right now is a massive system upgrade. It's a huge system upgrade that's going to expand your capacity to be with yourself, to see truth, to have your own back, as painful as it is. And that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay on the other side. Right? Like, there's just having faith that like we can't pay for this experience. This is another thing to really just get in touch with. And it's so hard to even imagine conceptualizing wanting to pay for a breakup, but you could not go to a school and pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to manufacture an experience of having your heart broken. It's a priceless experience that is a result of how powerful you love. And the more that you're in pain, it actually is evidence of your heart working, not that something's broken. And so when we can see it as a priceless experience, we can say, okay, well, this is me getting a PhD in my own heart. Bring it on, bring on the curriculum.
Oh, absolutely. And I always like to remind, people around me, and I even say it to myself sometimes, I'm like, these tough situations that I'm going through right now, it's just going to make me appreciate that person who like is so perfect for me. I'm going to appreciate them so much. I'm going to be a thank you.
Yeah,
thank
absolutely.
you.
Yes.
If I wouldn't appreciate them as much if it just like showed up on my doorstep and was right there. I'm appreciating it way more after I've been through all this shit.
Totally. Yeah. And that is so key to have that contrast. Absolutely.
Awesome. So where can people find you? I'm going to also give you, what's the guide that you gave me? I'll actually put this in the podcast episode as well, so people can grab it.
Yeah. The guide is 5 principles to creating an extraordinary relationship. And it is something that works in intimate relationship. It also works in any type of relationship with somebody who's important to you. And it's just 5 principles, 5 kind of counterintuitive ways of looking at relationship that will just shift the way that you see it, to give you more access to the longevity of the relationship, the health of the relationship, and your power in the relationship. So you can get that at claytonolsoncoaching.com. And then I also have a YouTube channel as well that this interview will be posted on, and you can check that out, where I've got a bunch of different philosophical ramblings and ideas to, again, help further your self-awareness and personal growth.
Awesome, which is also important. Well, thank you so much for being on here today.
Thank you for having me, Angela.
If you have any questions for me or for Clayton, feel free to reach out to us. We're here to help you. We want to help you along your journey so that you can really, get in that amazing relationship and also become in that relationship with yourself. So thanks again for being on here.